The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Stories are important. I remember bedtime stories as a child, and stories we told each other as children, and later the stories we tell over a drink or a meal with family and friends. Together with those stories which we read or hear about on television or the radio. As a teacher, I love story time at the end of the day, as most teachers do. And I remember telling the story of Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid. I would build up to the climax of the story, when the mermaid, now a silent princess, unable to speak, has to kill the prince she loves as he sleeps, in order to save her sisters from the spell of the wicked sea witch. I would tell of how she crept into his bedroom, parted the curtains of his four-poster bed in which he was sleeping, took a dagger in both hands, raised it high above her head as she looked down on him, and then taking a deep breath and closing her eyes, which were filled with tears, with all her strength brought the dagger down. Oh dear, it's home time, I would say. I'll tell you how the story ends tomorrow. Well, I never got away with that. I always had to finish the story before we went home. Stories are important because stories are about remembering. They are utterly and completely human. Computer hard drives and servers, records and record and store data, but they do not remember. Remembrance is about memories and stories. Without them, we are left with only the data. Science is important, for it has progressed us to where we are today over some 4 million years of human existence. Science tells us what life is, but not what life is for. Stories are important because they're about our history, and history is a story without a beginning, because our beginnings are always out of touch, out of reach. Stories are written into our DNA, and somewhere between 5,000 and 4,000 years ago, our ancestors began to write them down. So stories tell us about our existence. Genesis, the first book of the Bible, is full of great stories, which begin with the creation of the world, the story of Adam and Eve, Noah and the flood, the first murder, stories of betrayal, war, family fallouts, love, marriage, and then Genesis ends with the great family saga, the story of Joseph. The book of Psalms is a book of songs, which tell of a people's relationship with God. And like all good stories, the Psalms remain as relevant today as they did when they were first sung and spoken about all those years ago. Because these stories tell us about what it means to be human and why we are human. Perhaps the most well-known of the 150 Psalms is Psalm 23, which begins with that memorable line, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." What is it that has made this song, this story, live in the memory for so long, especially as parts of its meaning have perhaps been lost over the passage of time? Let's have a very brief look at it. If God is our shepherd, then we are his sheep. Like all sheep, we wander. Our needs are not really much beyond our own needs and comforts. A sheep is not a beast of burden. It does not really help the person who cares for it, whilst the shepherd's whole purpose is in keeping the sheep safe and fed. So it could be said that sheep are rather selfish, self-centered creatures. Sheep often stray mindlessly and willfully from the herd, usually because they follow other sheep. And sometimes, through no fault of their own, they find that they have strayed into dark and dangerous places. When this happens, it is the shepherd who looks for them, finds them and guides them home. The 23rd Psalm is about a God who keeps and guides his people into the right pathways with the gentle push of a shepherd's staff. The second part of the song, the psalm, reminds us that we have a meaningful relationship with our shepherd God because he empowers us with responsibility. He sets a table before us. He fills a cup for us. He anoints us with his strength, his confidence, and his love. It is our job to live as God wants us to live. The psalm calms us with its healing wisdom. Here is a story of a loving God who cares for his children by enfolding them and protecting them in his loving arms. This is a story that for 3,000 years has brought comfort to people through times of loss and grief, times of war, times of hardship, and times of utter despair. I remember reading recently of someone who read the psalm up to 20 times a day during a time of difficulty, and through reading it found great comfort in its words, and came to realize that not only is this a story of a God who stands beside us at times of hardship, but it is also a story of the love and hope which God gives to us and to his world. It reminds us in its last line that we will live in the house of the Lord forever, and not only now in this life, but forevermore. This is a story for all times. Stories are shared, they're filled with memories, and remembering matters. Remembering makes us what we are. Memories are our stories. They're part of our being, our souls, and our spirituality. Stories help us to make sense of the past and what it means to be human. If we do not keep them alive, we lose them forever. And some of them are far, far too important to lose. Psalm 23 is one of them, because its words of both power and gentleness are there to comfort us, not only in times of sorrow, but also in good times. This is a story, a song, a psalm for all times and also for all time.